Hello, in this video I'd like to go over setting up and using ethical walls within WorldDocs in order so you can block or allow access to specific subfolders or folders worth of documents. So where you go to set up your ethical walls is in WD-admin, and you're going to go into Group Security. Once you're in Group Security, you're going to click on the ethical wall radio button up here, and right now I have no ethical walls set up. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to set up a few ethical walls from my client files cabinet. My client files cabinet is based on a client matter folder structure. So we have to set up the ethical walls based on client matter codes because that's the way the folder structure works, and the ethical walls are based on those folders. So the first thing you need to do once you've determined that you're going to use ethical walls on a cabinet is you need to set up a couple ethical walls using asterisks to let WorldDocs know that you're going to be setting up ethical walls on that particular cabinet. And also, if you have Active Directory turned on, which I do in my case, and I have this cabinet AD enabled, you also need these first two that I'm setting up because it ties into the way the permissions are handled between WorldDocs and Active Directory. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click the add, I'm going to choose Client Files, and all I'm going to do is put in an asterisk in the client field and click OK. Now I'm going to create one more like this, but this time I'm going to put an asterisk in the client and the asterisk in the matter. So I'm doing this on the two folder-based fields in the cabinet. If you were doing a different cabinet, you had different fields that were your subfolder fields, you would set these up, one on the parent subfolder, and then if you had a second subfolder, a second one on the second subfolder. So here I've got one with a client and asterisk, client asterisk, matter asterisk, and all this is doing is letting WorldDocs know that you're going to be setting up ethical walls on this cabinet, and it also has an additional piece if AD is turned on, so it knows how to properly manage the permission settings between the WorldDocs interface and the Active Directory permissions. Now that I have these set up, I can actually start setting up my ethical walls to block and allow users. So let's say you have a matter that you need to block a couple users from. What you can do is you click the add button. I'm going to choose the client, and then I'm going to choose the matter and click OK. Initially it sets it up as an allow. So anyone that has access to this cabinet will have access to this folder. Now what I need to do is I need to add the users that I want to block. So I'm going to click on the Add Users button, and I'm going to choose the two users that I want to block from this particular matter. The two checked. Notice now it's allowing everyone that has access to this cabinet to this folder except for these two users who are explicitly being blocked from this particular matter. And now this is set up. Now let's say you have a situation where you want to block everyone and only allow a few users into a matter. Once again, I can hit the add button, choose my client files cabinet, I choose the client, I choose the matter, and in this particular case, instead of it being allow, I want to be a block. So I'm going to check this box next to it, click on the block button, and block this group. Now I'm going to add the two users that I want to have access to it. So I pick these two users, click allow, and now I've set up the wall so that it's blocking everybody that has access to this cabinet from this particular folder, but it's just allowing these two users. So by default, every time you set up a new ethical wall, it initially sets itself to allow everyone. So if you run into this scenario where you want to block everyone and then add a couple users, you have to change this first setting that automatically gets added from an allow to a block. Now you can also use an asterisk in your ethical wall. So let's say you have a situation where you have a client and you only want to give 3 users access to this client's documents. Instead of setting up an ethical wall for every single matter for that client, you could set up an ethical wall where you just choose that client number and put an asterisk in the matter field. and then that ethical wall will apply to all matters for that client. So for example, I could hit the add button, choose the client, put an asterisk in the matter, so this will make it for this client all of their matters, and then if you add new matters, even after you set up this ethical wall, it'll apply to new matters that get added. And now at this point, let's say I want to block everyone and just allow a few users to this particular client. I can choose this and change this initial allow to a block, hit the add users, select the users that should have access, and hit an allow. Now notice you also have a read-only padlock. So allow gives them full access, block blocks them completely, but you can also set up read-only, where you basically allow a user to go into that matter just to view and look at the files, but they can't edit any of the files. So if you run into a situation like that, let's say I have another user that I want to give access to this client, but I don't want this user editing or adding any documents. I just want them to be able to view what's in there. I could hit the add users, choose the read only, and just give that user read only access to that matter. Then once you're done, you're going to want to hit the save button to save these changes. And that'll save the changes within WorldDocs. At this point, your ethical walls are in place and they're enforced through the WorldDocs client. But what happens if you have a case where you also want those permissions written immediately to the folder if you have Active Directory integration turned on, rather than waiting for the indexer to update that during its nightly update? Well, the first thing is you need to make sure you have at least one file in the folder so the folder exists. So if, let's say, I just created this particular ethical wall, but we haven't saved any documents in there yet, if I try and run this sync selected rules so it automatically creates the AD permissions for that folder, it'll fail because the folder doesn't exist yet. So go ahead and just make sure to save a document in there if the folder doesn't already exist, even if you just save a test document in there. And then once you do that, instead of having to wait till after hours for the indexer to set the AD permissions on its nightly update, you could actually set the AD permissions on this ethical wall real time by just clicking the sync select rule. So if I choose that, would you like to, go up and pull up, notice I've got files in here, so it synced it and it displayed it in Windows Explorer so I can see what's in there. And now those rules are synced and set up. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover in the ethical wall setting up.